Yo, Bitcoin just ripped to $66,000 and no one knows why. But I think if we piece everything together, a few bullish developments have been happening behind closed doors. First, Blackrock, this crazy Blackrock presentation that we're going to play for you guys, making the case that Bitcoin is growing exponentially faster than the adoption of the internet and the adoption of telephones. Also, following up on some news that we did a couple weeks ago, there was this news interview from the legacy mainstream media about how the Middle East is adopting Bitcoin miners. We were speculating on that last week. Now it is confirmed. Bitcoin's most recent price rise will begin to make sense once you start putting all these pieces together. And not only will you begin to understand why Bitcoin is quietly climbing, but you will begin to understand what this next leg of the Bitcoin bull run could be unlike anything you've ever seen before. While most people have been bored over the last 8 months, it's been excruciating, chopping sideways action. Today, we're going to show you why this has been incredibly healthy for Bitcoin and why the exact same thing happened in 2020, right before Bitcoin exploded by over 600%. So I think that the end of this year is going to be explosive, literally no pun intended. And I also believe that this chop consolidation was actually really, really healthy because it built a very solid foundation. I mean, if I told you back in 2021 that we were literally going to consolidate, chop sideways at the all-time high, you would not have believed me. So I have a couple clips lined up for you guys right in the beginning to talk about the Blackrock stuff, to talk about the Middle East stuff. But before we jump into it, I do want to bring up my legendary co-host who is always optimistic. Of course, I'm talking about Optimus Fields. How you doing, bro?
I am doing wonderful. I do have a low-key case of the Mondays, guys, but once the show gets in, everything's good, man. Life's wonderful. Everything's great. I feel great. Can't really complain here, Nico. Things are great.
Absolutely, 100%. All right, everybody, no more delay. Let's jump into some of the bullish news. So first of all, I just got to say, we called this. What do we say on Simply Bitcoin? Tomorrow's Bitcoin news today.
Yeah.
I mean, we called this. We made an episode last week making the case that the Middle East was getting into Bitcoin. And the reason we were making the case is, of course, in the UAE, they were lowering taxes. And they were also, the Bitcoin conference is going to be throwing a conference in Abu Dhabi called Bitcoin MENA. And also that some of their hedge funds and some of their sovereign wealth funds were getting into Bitcoin mining, but it was all like on articles. It was like on, third-party websites, and you're reading the article and you're like, okay, yeah, you have to take their word for it. Well, now it's confirmed. This is legacy mainstream media talking about Bitcoin mining in the United Arab Emirates. Let's check it out.
How do you think Bitcoin mining in the UAE is different than other regions in the world?
Where we are in UAE, we started Bitcoin mining in UAE around 3 years ago. We built one of the biggest hydro sites in the world, which uses water technology to cool itself. It's one of the biggest in the region and in the world. As we go on, we are trying to expand in the region.
Maybe can you share more, Bijan? Like, what is the outsized role the UAE plays when it comes to crypto mining? Do you have any data on what percentage of a hash rate is coming from the region? And also the source of electricity that is being used, which is obviously a big component in the cost of Bitcoin mining. Where does that come from when it comes to UAE mining?
Absolutely. About the data, to give you exact data, it would be not correct. But right now, where we sit is around 4% of the hash rate of the world. Okay. Is producing from the region. But that number is subject to changes on a daily basis as the hash rate index changes. In sort of the energy, as you know, in UAE in general, we are moving to green, as His Excellency Dr. Jaber explaining COP28. By 2050, we want to be net zero carbon. But the grid is moving towards solar and nuclear.
So this is incredibly bullish, guys, not in itself. If you just play this clip by itself, it doesn't mean anything. But if you connect the dots, it makes me so bullish for 2025. Okay, you have the institutional adoption of Bitcoin, the approval of the ETF. You have pension funds like the Wisconsin Pension Fund getting exposure to Bitcoin. You have banks like JP Morgan, Wells Fargo getting exposure to Bitcoin via the ETFs. You have the second largest bank in Europe, BNP Paribas, getting exposure to the ETF through getting exposure to Bitcoin through the ETF. You have Goldman Sachs, which is a traditionally very conservative bank, getting exposure to Bitcoin via the ETF. You have Michael Saylor continuing to prove that the Bitcoin strategy that MicroStrategy has adopted is just like literally destroying the competition. MicroStrategy has literally proven that just by adopting Bitcoin, you will outcompete the rest of the S&P 500. Since MicroStrategy adopted a Bitcoin standard back in 2020, the stock is up like 1,600%. It is something wild. Of course, you have the Kingdom of Bhutan mining Bitcoin. The Kingdom of Bhutan has 13,000 Bitcoin. Like, holy cow. Of course, you have Paraguay, you have El Salvador, and now we have it confirmed that the UAE, this very small country in the Middle East, basically makes up 4% of the hash rate. Like, we had news that Russia, Vladimir Putin legalized Bitcoin mining. So you put all the pieces together, this is exactly what Max Kaiser predicted when he was talking about the global hash war. And of course, this lines up perfectly for an explosive 2025 after we get out of this consolidation area. Here is a clip from the Digital Assets Conference that Blackrock hosted, or at least Blackrock had a presentation of. And here they're just putting out the numbers. The fact is that Bitcoin is being adopted on a faster pace than the internet and mobile phones. That should tell you everything you need to know. And by the way, we are still so freaking early to this. So this is a pretty long clip. I'll play you guys some of it. Let's check it out.
Blackrock, I really spend a lot of my time thinking about the future and some of the disruptive changes that are impacting the world and society and the economy and our portfolios around us. Oftentimes this is about disruptive technologies. Oftentimes it's about societal changes. But what we found with blockchain and digital assets is that in some ways this is one of the fastest growing technologies we've seen in the last few years. On the right-hand side of the chart, you can see our adoption curve. This is just looking at how quickly certain assets are adopted by society. And you can see that blockchain and digital assets are being adopted faster than major revolutions before it, whether that's the internet or whether that's cell phones. And there's a couple of reasons for this. The first reason is just we're living in a more digital economy than ever before. If we're consuming things online, streaming videos, playing video games, buying digital content, it makes sense to have digitally native assets to conduct those transactions, particularly when there's, secondly, and importantly, in a year like this year, where over half the world's population is voting for new leadership, not just the elections in the United States, in Mexico, in India, and the European Union, we're seeing more geopolitical risk than before, and in fact, declining trust in institutions. Whether that's trust in government institutions for maintaining peace and order, whether that's trust in central banks in terms of keeping inflation under control, more distrust has exacerbated the need for a global monetary alternative. The third we're seeing is demographic changes, the rise of the millennial and Gen Z generation. Millennials, at least in the United States, are set to inherit trillions of dollars, are entering peak earnings years in their work, and are increasingly playing an important role in the economy. And millennials are very different from previous generations, because we, were the first generation to be digitally native, growing up with the internet, growing up with computers. We understand digital better than previous generations, and that means we're more likely to adopt digital currencies. And then finally, what I think has been really important to Blackrock in our journey in the digital asset space has been the maturing of infrastructure in digital assets. We've seen billions of dollars move in venture capital and private equity into digital assets to fund incredible innovation in blockchain. We've seen the regulatory environment evolve to get more constructive around digital assets and how people can buy them. We've seen extremely talented people leave traditional finance to go into DeFi to help lead some of these innovations. And all of this infrastructure has really matured over the last 5 years. So between all of these tailwinds, it's really creating the opportunity for digital assets to gain broader adoption across more investors around the world. With that being
So just kind of leave it at that. I mean, Opti, I'm going to pass it on to you, man. Like, this is the perfect storm that is brewing for an explosive end of Q4 heading into 2025. And if the Bitcoin cycles repeat themselves, man, like, I am so beyond excited, not only from a price standpoint, but also from a revolutionary standpoint. Like, you know, you heard the BlackRock executive talking about it there, how millennials were just so much more open to adopting, to use BlackRock's own words, not mine, a non-sovereign alternative to local fiat currencies because of the rise in distrust in institutions. So overall, this is incredibly bullish stuff. You have countries all over the world just confirmed. UAE, they basically represent 4% of the hash rate. I didn't know that was the case. Like, we were reading that article last week about how they were lowering taxes and all that stuff, and now this guy just comes out of nowhere. It's like, yeah, we've been immersion mining for years now, and we actually represent 4% of the hash rate. How many more countries around the world are secretly mining Bitcoin or adopting Bitcoin that we don't know about? We would not have found out about the Kingdom of Bhutan if it wasn't for the Celsius lawsuit leaking the fact that they were a part of it. If it wasn't for the Celsius lawsuit, the Kingdom of Bhutan wouldn't have said anything. They would have just kept it to themselves, right? So how many more countries around the world are either secretly mining Bitcoin, adopting Bitcoin? And of course, for anyone who's a Bitcoin hodler, for anyone who believes in the Bitcoin revolution, all of this is incredibly bullish, because all of a sudden, those institutions and those countries, their incentives start to line up with yours. And all of a sudden, as a sovereign individual, it's going to get to a point where you're going to have the power to be able to pick and choose what jurisdiction you want to live in based on the laws and regulations of that locality. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on all this? Man, incredibly bullish news coming out of the UAE, and of course, incredibly bullish news coming out of BlackRock. Once again, Larry Fink wins Employee of the Month. Can't thank him enough. Anyways, Opti, what's your take?
Yeah, first of all, shouts out to Uncle Larry pumping our bags. But yeah, like the UAE news, we've been covering it for a while now. We've heard a lot of rumors about that this was the case, and to actually hear someone that is more familiar with the situation say essentially like, yeah, we have 4% of the world's hash rate. That's pretty crazy. You know, that's a pretty big number there. And it just goes to show that this is catching on and more people are waking up to this whole Bitcoin thing going on right now. And I've been saying for a while, and obviously we've been covering the data on the show, and we really can only see from news stories and information trickling out that this is catching on. And I've been saying that for a minute, Nico, the exact words you said, that there's a perfect storm on the horizon. And it seems ever since the ETF got released, it seems ever since, you know, Trump even announced that he's being more pro Bitcoin, or rather more crypto, it seems like the game theory has shifted, and obviously shifted in our direction. And I really do think that 2025 is going to be a big year. Obviously, as someone that's in the Bitcoin space, maybe someone newer to the Bitcoin space, you always kind of want to point at certain news stories and use that as, you know, the reasons for the Bitcoin price to pop up. Maybe I'm still, you know, a Luddite here, but I just think it's still kind of the cycles playing out right now. I don't think we're out of this cycle theory yet. I don't think we're in super cycle territory yet, but it does feel like there's a lot of data points, and this time does feel different. Obviously, I feel like a cliche Bitcoiner here, because we say this every time the price starts pumping, like this time's different, I swear, guys. But this time is fundamentally different. Now that we have institutional capital being able to allocate to Bitcoin, we're seeing nation state adoption of Bitcoin play out. It does feel like this cycle will be different. Does that mean that we're going to get out of this cycle theory in the next 4 years? I'm still kind of hesitant to say that we're out of the cycle theory. But, you know, historically speaking, it's usually, I forget the exact number, but I'm pretty sure that the number that we've been using historically is that basically 170 days after the halving is when the price starts to run. And I think we're around like 177 days since after the halving. So it does seem to be aligning perfectly to historical data. Of course, we only have 3 or 4 data points on this, and we're still kind of seeing if the cycle theories are playing out. But I think it's just kind of, this is the time when Bitcoin starts to run. But with all these other data points, it does feel a little different, and things are changing.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the rest of the show, guys, stay tuned because we have so much news to cover, so much bullish news. Of course, the double standards behind the DOJ, how they treat banks, and then how they treat the rest of the industry, something that we've been covering for quite a while now. And of course, Elon Musk's historic rocket landing. I mean, it wasn't even a landing. It was being caught by like this giant arm, which was, it was crazy. And I think it's a kind of indicative of what Bitcoiners are advocating for. Like one of the major talking points that you always hear is like, who will build the roads? And what Bitcoiners are going to advocate for is like the private sector tends to do a much better job at resource allocation than the public sector. And I think that's something that people have to, people just, I don't want to say come to terms. It's a little bit strong, but people just, I think you should be aware of it because that's going to be one of the talking points that you're going to hear from a lot of people when Bitcoiners advocate for smaller and smaller and smaller government. Because a lot of the economic woes that people are currently feeling, specifically on the rise of the cost of living, as much as politicians want to gaslight you into believing that, you know, it's everything and anything but the fact that they're debasing the currency, a lot of the reason as to why people can't afford things is because of way too much government spending. That's the reality of it. And here's the thing, if the government spending was justified, then okay, you know, you can make an argument and you could say, okay, you know, my life is better for it. But I would like to make the case that I think the private sector could not only do a lot of the things that the government does, they could do it a lot in a lot more efficient manner and in a hell of a lot cheaper. That's my case. But anyways, before we jump into that, I do want to give a very special shout out to Simply Bitcoin's lead sponsor. We wouldn't be here without our sponsors. And of course, our lead sponsor is bitcoinwell.com. Start enabling your independence today with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin in Canada and the USA. Buy real Bitcoin. And to get started, all you got to do is you put in your email address right here on bitcoinwell.com. It's a clear 1% spread. It's obviously Bitcoin only. And what makes Bitcoin Well different is that it's completely non-custodial, empowering sovereign ownership with free automatic self-custody. So what does that mean? That means that every time you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, as soon as the funds clear, it goes straight from your from Bitcoin Well straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. Doesn't even give you the ability to leave it on the exchange. By the way, every time you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, you earn Bitcoin Well points, and you could use those points towards the Bitcoin Wishing Well contest. So we'll do it for you guys right here. Get your Lightning wallets ready. First person to scan the QR code wins today's prize. Today's prize is 500 Satoshis. Every time you toss a coin into the Bitcoin Wishing Well, you have an opportunity to win up to 1 million Satoshis. I heard the other day that on BTC Sessions channel, someone won 240,000. I think on our channel, the highest the awards have been 24,000. That happened 2 days back to back. So you never know.
You're off. It's 210,000 and 21,000.
Thank you, Opti. But you never know. You never know. So if you use promo code SimplyBTC to sign up to bitcoinwell.com today, you get 3 tosses into the Bitcoin Wishing Well absolutely free. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to numbers. We have lots to talk about. Let's check it out. All right, everybody, before we jump into it, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Stampseed. Usually when you buy yourself a hardware wallet, it comes with a piece of paper, and you're meant to write your seed words on that piece of paper. Problem is that paper is prone to water damage, fire damage, your dog could eat it. That's not the proper way to store your generational wealth. The proper way is to literally stamp your seed phrase into a plate of titanium. And that's exactly what the Stamp Seed Kit allows you to do. It's a titanium seed phrase storage kit. It comes with the hammer. It comes with the letter stamping tools. It comes with the anvil. It comes with everything you need so that from the privacy of your own home, you can literally letter by letter stamp your seed into a plate of titanium, which is going to survive the test of time. They put a blowtorch to it, it survived. They pressed it with like a press, it survived, got crushed, the data survived. They put it in salt water, the data survived. Your dog's probably not going to want to eat a plate of titanium. This is the proper way to secure your generational wealth, your seed words. Get yourself a stamped seed titanium seed phrase storage kit today. Use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store. Scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price, we're a little bit down. We were at 66K this morning. We're at 65,750. Sats per dollar, 1,521. Block height, 865,626. Realized monetary inflation, 1.3%. Market capitalization, 1.3 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 7.03%. Money supply, 19,767,364 BTC. Percentage issued, 94.13%. In the grand scheme of things, we are just getting the party started as the theme of today's show. Anyways, I wanted to move on to something that I believe is extremely hypocritical because it's a double standard. And one of the things that I'll say is that remember why Bitcoin was discovered. Remember why Bitcoin was invented by Satoshi. In the Genesis blog, it says, Chancellor, on the brink of the second bailout for banks, Satoshi inherently knew that the US government or governments around the world were going to continue to bail out banks. They were going to continue to bail out central banks. And there's evil alliance between central banks and governments where central banks essentially fund all the government spending, and of course politicians create a regulatory moat so that the central banks can continue doing this. The problem is, as much as governments have pitched us on the idea that central banks actually introduce stability to the economy, it's important to remember that the two largest financial crises in world history, the 2008 recession and of course the 1929 to 1933 Great Depression, all happened under central banking. I also don't think it's a coincidence that the two largest wars in world history, World War I and World War II, all happened during central banking. I don't think any of that is a coincidence. Now, why am I saying all of this? Well, I want to highlight the double standard between how the US government treats people that are part of our industry rather than how they treat people that are officially part of the banking industry. So, of course, we all know that the Binance founder, CZ, was sentenced to 4 months in prison after plea deal. So Binance, the Binance founder, CZ, pleaded guilty to money laundering violations in November and was sentenced to 4 months in prison on Tuesday. This isn't just an isolated incident. Arthur Hayes, CEO of BitMEX. Arthur Hayes, in his plea deal, guilty to one count of violating the Bank Secrecy Act in February and faced a sentence of up to 12 months in prison. And of course, we all know what happened to the Samurai developers. First, they started with the Tornado Cash developers. Once they set precedent and the Coin Center case was dismissed by a judge, then shortly after, they attacked the Samurai wallet developers. And the US government, specifically the Department of Justice, accused the two developers with operating Samurai Wallet, an unlicensed money transmitting business that executed over $2 billion in unlawful transactions and laundered over $100 million in criminal proceeds. Now you'll see a common theme between all of this. So whether it's CZ, Arthur Hayes, or Bitcoin privacy developers, they all got locked in a box. They were arrested. They were put in a box because of what they were doing. But here's the problem. The problem is the double standard. The problem is it's rules for thee, but not for me. That is the fundamental issue. So Here's Peter St. Onge, and he says, you'd go to jail for decades. They just pay a fine. At some point, it's licensed crime. And I would make the case that they just see it as a cost of doing business. Why aren't any TD executives like, why don't they get held accountable for this? Let's check out the official DOJ press conference held by Attorney General Merrick Garland.
I'm not hearing anything, Nico.
Oh, is it glitching out? Sometimes it does this. Here, let me try that. How about now, Opti?
I'm still not hearing anything.
Okay, unfortunately, guys.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up real quick.
Yeah, so while Opti does that, I'll kind of narrate this. But unfortunately, guys, here's the deal. Look, so TD Bank fined $3 billion for enabling drug cartel money laundering, the largest penalty of its kind in U.S. history. So here, Opti has it pulled up. Let's see if that works.
Before we get started, I want to extend my sympathy to the millions of Americans who've had their lives turned upside down by Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene. I know I speak for all of us in expressing my gratitude to the first responders on the ground who are carrying out rescue missions. And I want to thank all the volunteers who are helping their neighbors get through these storms. And now to the subject of today's announcement. Today, TD Bank pled guilty to multiple felonies, including conspiring to violate the Bank Secrecy Act and commit money laundering. TD Bank has also agreed to a $1.8 billion criminal penalty. Combined with civil enforcement actions announced today by other agencies, the United States will be imposing a total of approximately $3 billion against TD Bank. TD Bank created an environment that allowed financial crime to flourish. By making its services convenient for criminals, it became one. Today, TD Bank became the largest bank in U.S. history to plead guilty to Bank Secrecy Act program failures and the first bank in history to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering. This is also the largest ever penalty under the Bank Secrecy Act and the first time the Justice Department has assessed a daily fine against a bank. As part of the plea agreement, TD Bank will fundamentally restructure its corporate compliant program at its U.S.-based bank, which is the 10th largest in the United States. The bank has also agreed to the imposition of a 3-year monitorship and a 5-year term of probation. While the bank has started its remediation, it will continue to remediate and improve its anti-money laundering compliance program to ensure that the bank operates lawfully and safely moving forward.
Okay, so the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is the double standards. Okay, the problem is this. Okay, so same violation, money laundering, right? With Arthur Hayes, 1 count of violating the Bank Secrecy Act, right here. That executed over 2 billion unlawful transactions and laundered over $100 million in criminal proceeds. According to the DOJ, they laundered significantly more. Why? I don't understand why. Like, I don't know what to say. They did the same thing that our industry did. But because they're a bank, they get a fine? And we get put in a box? I don't understand. Explain that to me, please. I don't get it. And this is something that has happened over and over again. Whether it's Chase, whether HSBC got caught laundering money for the Mexican drug cartels. So I don't understand. Why is it that when our industry breaks their regulations, we get locked up in prison, and when the banks do it, they get a fine? That's the problem. This is the issue. This is the issue, that it's hypocrisy. It's rules for thee and not for me. And I'll tell you why. It's a rhetorical question. I'll tell you why. The reason is that our system is outside their purview. So they're trying to make an example. That's what it's about. This is disgusting. This is despicable. I remember when they held the same press conference for CZ, they mentioned the word terrorism like 50 times. They had Janet Yellen up there, Merrick Garland. I believe they have Mayorkas up there as well. But when look, here's Burn the Bridge. And he says, TD Bank's money laundering conspiracy charges, handles $18.3 trillion users' funds, $3 billion fine. Samurai Wallet money laundering conspiracy charges, handles 0% users' funds, drones, armored vehicles, pre-dawn raids, developers indicted, servers seized, facing 25-year sentences. F this dystopia. I don't understand. Please make this make sense to me. Because you can't lecture me on justice, legal, like we're all equal under the law. You can't look at me in the face and tell me that, it's equal justice. You should have followed the rules. That's bullshit. No banker went to jail for the crime that happened in 2008. No banker went to jail for what happened during HSBC. When Christine Lagarde, who was the head of the IMF and now is the head of the European Central Bank, when she got charged with a crime, they promoted her to the head of the European Central Bank. But when our industry does it, they put us in a box. What's up with Julian Assange, man? What's up with Ross? Ross got, 3 life sentences. And these bankers, they get a fine? That is not right. That is not right. That is a double standard. That is not equal justice before the law. This is the literal definition of a cabal. This is the literal definition of a mafia. I can't describe it in any other way. This is injustice in so many different ways. When we do it, box. When they do it, oh, you get a fine. And they don't even name the executives. They just said the organization, TD Bank. So why couldn't they just fine Binance? Why couldn't they fine BitMEX? BitMEX broke these rules. No. It was the CEO. What about the CEO of TD Bank? Is he not held responsible for any of this? This is insane. This is insane. This is not equal justice. This is rules for thee. They are exempt from the same laws we are meant to follow. They expect us to follow those laws and take them seriously while they're lecturing us on a podium about, your safety and all this bullshit. But then we get locked in prison and they get a fine. If it was the same standard, I wouldn't say anything. But the fact that it's a double standard makes it an injustice and it makes it not right. It's not ethical. And the reason they get away with this is because they're in cahoots with these people. The bankers are in the cahoots with the government. That's what it's all about. And the Bitcoin industry is outside of that ecosystem. And it's not in cahoots with the government. So they're weaponizing their monopoly of violence to go after our industry, but at the same time, they just give out fines. Even though they break the exact same law. And I can even make an argument that they broke the law to a much larger extent. Someone in the comments says multi-tier justice system. How is it not? Please explain it to me. I just want it answered. How is this ethical? We've been getting beat up with a metaphorical 2x4 as an industry for the last 3.5 years. Not gonna lie, it's been Operation Choke Point 2.0. When a bank gets caught red-handed, money laundering, breaking the same laws, they get a fine. When we do it, they literally raid our shit, lock us in a box, and say that Bitcoin enables money laundering. Here's the reality check. The vast majority of illicit finance is conducted using the traditional financial system. It is not conducted using Bitcoin. But we are the scapegoat. That is bullshit. And it's our job to highlight it. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, well, personally, I'm not surprised this is the case. It's just becoming more and more obvious to more people that if you have enough money, you can basically break any law, and all you have to do is pay a fine. Again, I became a man. You know, I came of age during 2008 financial crisis, and it's like we're seeing this all over again. Though I think the funniest part is that they are coming out here and parading it like they, did something really good by getting this huge fine. But when you really dig into the details, it's like if you have enough money, you can break any law and you just pay the fine. If you look at the numbers of how much money TD Bank has made in profit, that $3 billion, I thought it was $1.8 billion, but apparently all the government agencies kind of wanted to pick the pockets and, they added more fines on top of it. I think $3 billion is something like, I don't know, like somewhere around like 2 to 3% of all the profits that they've made the last 10 years when they've supposedly been breaking this law. And so it's just like, it's a slap on the wrist. Again, for most people out there that aren't aware of what I would argue the illegitimacy of the institutions and the system, the justice system we're a part of, it should be a wake-up call to most people that this is just the status quo. We know it's all downhill from the money. We know that the bankers and the lobbyists control the government. And then we have the media that gets paid by the infinite money printers out there to justify all of this crazy stuff going on. So hopefully sooner than later, more people are waking up to the fact that this is an illegitimate system, and the powers that be are out here robbing the coffers as quickly as possible, and the media is out here to just cover for them and ensure that the game keeps going. But as we argue on the show constantly, this system can only go on as long as people trust the system. But I think we're at least getting to a point right now, a cross section, a crossroad here, where more people are waking up and they're going to start to ask themselves, why am I using this money? Why am I using the enemy's money when we have a better option? That is, of course, Bitcoin, and I can opt out of this stuff. Obviously, I don't think it's enough for us to just kind of like bury our heads in the sand and create like, parallel communities. I think that's part of the solution, but I think it's becoming more and more obvious that as the citizens here, especially in America, this is supposedly a country run by we the people. I think we need to get involved and try to wake up more people and be like, look, let's reclaim some power here, because the elite class, the unproductive class, the administrative state, whatever you want to call it, are out here wilding, and they are literally stealing as much wealth from the middle class and the lower class as possible. And then they're, continuing to deploy these divide and conquer strategies. And we're all, well, not, I would argue not Bitcoiners, but for the majority of people, they're out here, shooting arrows across the bow. And it's really like, it's not the other side of the aisle that's the problem. It's literally the people in power. And now we're getting more and more exposure to the problem, and people are hopefully waking up to this. But I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better. But I think now is kind of going into what we would argue on Twitter, like the Great Awakening. And with that comes, the great psyop, where they have to continue to misdirect information and misdirect our attention. But I think we are getting to a focal point here. I think we're getting to a tipping point where people are starting to wake up and notice, and hopefully more people start to adopt Bitcoin, because, hashtag Bitcoin fixes this.
Yeah, 100%. And like when the Blackrock executive was talking about it in the beginning, where he was like, yeah, people are like not trusting institutions. This is why, right? When Hillary Clinton was talking about how they must censor social media or they'll lose control, this is what she's referring to. Like, look, if we trusted the government with money, they abused that trust. And then they're getting upset that we found a non-sovereign alternative. that is uncorruptible, right? Like, that's not my problem. It's not my fault that you designed the entire system on the ability for you to co-opt an intermediary. Now that individuals could take self-custody of their own wealth, and by doing so, their own destiny, like, and you're going to try to demonize that, and you're going to try to demonize and attack the off-ramps while you guys are guilty of the things that you guys are accusing us of. I'm sorry. I don't want to be lectured by that. That's BS. I'm sorry, guys. That's BS. If you guys held yourselves to the same standards that you hold the Bitcoin and crypto industry to, this would be a different conversation. But you can't look at me with a straight face and look at me in the eye and parade yourself behind this official emblem in this suit and talking to me how, pat yourselves on the back and telling me how you're protecting the American people. They get fines, we get jail sentences. That's bullshit. Not surprising, but that's bullshit. And you want to know why us younger generations, and I give it credit because there's a lot of awesome Bitcoin boomers out there, but the millennials and the Gen Zers that are adopting Bitcoin out of necessity, you want to know why we don't trust the system? There's a great example right there. It's right there. It's not equal justice. It's rules for thee, but not for me. Rules for the politicians in DC, and then rules for everyone else. And that's got to end. Anyways, everybody, let's get to news. We have a lot to talk about. Stay tuned. Elon had a historic moment. The world had a historic moment. We literally saw a rocket the size of a 35-story building literally land, getting caught by giant metal arms. And it was one of the most insane things I've ever seen in my life. So stay tuned because we're going to talk about literally what is the role of government in people's lives. Are you getting the value back in terms of what you're paying for in taxes? And I'm not just talking about income tax. That's a whole other debate, which I don't want to get into. I'm talking about the tax of inflation. Are you getting your money's back? And I would like to make the case that the answer is no. And a lot of the cases against that would say, Nico, what about the roads? And I would say, I think the private sector would build the roads a whole lot better than the so-called public sector. Anyways, guys, it all comes down to incentives at the end of the day. All right, everybody, let's move on to news. Lots to talk about. Let's check it out.
Special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet design with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your piece of Bitcoin.
All right, everybody. Opti is going to model the Passport by Foundation devices today. If you use promo code Simply, you won't get Opti, but you will get a discount to the Passport by Foundation devices. It's incredibly easy to use. It's very intuitive. This is the perfect gift to give to someone who perhaps is a little bit intimidated by self-custody. The Passport makes self-custody incredibly convenient without sacrificing the security of cold storage Bitcoin. So get yourself a Passport by Foundation devices. Use promo code Simply to get a small discount. Anyways, this happened this weekend. This is one of the most insane things I've ever seen. And a lot of Elon hate. By the way, the same week, Elon announced the robo-taxi and the robo-van. Literally a freaking car that drives itself. Gnarly shit. Okay, just freaking gnarly. And anyways, and then Mike Solana tweets out, what an asshole, right? Because there's a lot of people that don't like Elon. But I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen this, or you guys have seen this. For our audio listeners, here's literally a rocket the size of a 35-story building, weighing 2,500 tons, literally getting caught by metal arms. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen.
Still not getting audio, Nico.
That's just fucking crazy. So anyways, the most freaking insane thing I've ever seen. And here's the thing about Elon, right? And then Opti, I might have to send this to you because it looks like the audio.
Yeah, drop it in the private chat. I'll pull it up.
The audio's not working on my end, or it's not cooperating.
It's that French internet, bro.
Yeah, everyone. I'm streaming. I'm gonna be streaming from Paris these next couple of weeks. So forgive me for any technical difficulties. But anyways, I'll start talking about this. Opti, let me know when you have it ready.
Yeah, I got that. One sec.
Elon has he tweeted this, and this happened October 11th. So he tweeted this about 11 days ago. Opti has it pulled up, so I'm gonna pull mine down. There we go. This is mine.
Wait. Yeah, this is mine.
Here, there we go. All right. So Opti, could you? So Elon tweeted this about October 11th, and Elon actually wants to launch he wants to launch a government efficiency committee. So he wants to cut down the size of government. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Even though he's correctly identifying the issues, right? The problem is that voting is a half measure. So let's say in an ideal case, you get Trump in office, and then you get Elon in office, and then, they cut the size of the government. It doesn't address the root problem. The root problem is the fiat money printer. Unless you take away the government's ability to create money for free that everyone else has to work for, this will continue to happen because the government is incentivized for this to happen. The only way you fix this is by taking away the governments to create money in the first place. Meaning their only way of raising revenue is via direct taxation. And they can only do that to a certain extent before people are saying, you know what, I can't, it's law first curve, until people start to kind of revolt back and they say, no, I don't want to partake in this. So Elon is heading in the right direction. And I can't emphasize how important that is because, again, this is a company, his companies, both SpaceX and Tesla. As much as people dislike Elon, the reality is that Tesla is the fourth largest company, publicly traded company that holds Bitcoin right now. They currently hold almost 10,000 Bitcoin, so 9,720 Bitcoin. And SpaceX also is believed to own Bitcoin as well, right? So again, you know, and again, it was a couple years ago that actually Elon announced that Tesla was going to enable for you to purchase Teslas in Bitcoin. And then he had to, I think he was tapped on the shoulder or something, and he backtracked. So it's kind of like the gold bugs, the tragedy of the gold bugs, because the gold bugs identified what the problem was, but they had the wrong tool. And I'm telling you, with Elon, it's like, dude, you are so close. You are so close, but you are so far. And again, Bitcoin is a bit of a humility test. It is. You have to humble yourself a little bit, right? So anyways, let's play this video that Elon reposted from his personal Twitter account a couple days ago.
I'm not an anarchist. I believe in a government, but a limited government. And the government should be limited, in my opinion, to very simple functions. Number one, to defending the country against foreign enemies. I have tried for a long time to see how to make national defense a private enterprise, and I have never succeeded. It's easy to see how to privatize schooling, but I don't know how to privatize national defense. A second function of government, and one which it performs very, very badly, is to protect the individual citizen against abuse and coercion by other citizens, to keep you from being hit over the head, mugged on the street, your house broken into, and so on. And I believe that the government performs that function very ineffectively because it's doing so many things it has no business doing. The third function of government, a very important function, is to define the rules of the game we play. What's private property? If an airplane flies 10,000 feet over your house, is he violating your private property? If he flies 10 feet over your house, is he violating your private property? There's nothing natural about where the line should be drawn. So we have to have some mechanism for making the rules about that, and that is an appropriate government function. And fourth, it's appropriate for government to provide a mechanism for adjudicating disputes about the meaning of those rules, a judicial system. Those are the four essential functions of government, in my opinion, and those are the only functions that are essential. There may be some other areas in which, if you started with nothing more than that, government might conceivably do more good than harm. But from where you are now, if you could only move back in that direction, it would be marvelous.
Okay, so, and then again, right, Milton Friedman, absolute, genius. Everyone agrees to it. But why is government not doing those things in the first place? Why is government more focused on sending hundreds of billions of dollars to fund foreign wars than they are about funding their own rescue efforts of victims of the hurricane? Why is it that in some parts of California, if you are a criminal and you steal a certain amount of things that's under a certain limit, there's no penalty to that? Why are you paying? The whole point of paying taxes is so that government protects your property, so that government enables law and order, so that government protects your best interest. Government has been Frankensteined into basically becoming God, essentially, the way that I see it. And why is that happening? That is happening because of the government's ability to create money out of thin air. And I think, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, I think it makes people sick. I think it balloons the minds of politicians into thinking that they're godlike saviors. And I think it's a very, 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 very difficult problem, but also a very dangerous precedent that politicians have so much power, because it's like, think about it. Like, the U.S. has been in endless wars since, the you could say the 50s and the 60s. How are they paying for that? They print the difference. That's how they do it. And then that has consequences. And the consequences is, if you are lower middle class You don't have the means to save in assets, meaning you're living paycheck to paycheck. So you get money, and that money's in fiat, and use that money to pay for your living expenses, right? But you don't really have extra to, like, you know, save for a rainy day. Problem is that when the government debases the currency, the purchasing power of that fiat that you're earning continues to decrease. So if your employer is not increasing your compensation by at least 10% on a yearly basis, you're getting poorer. This is what people feel inherently. They feel this. They know it to be true. But the Greek tragedy of all this is that they continue to seek a political solution. That's what Elon is doing. That's what Trump is doing. That's what, you know, to give them credit, they think differently, but that's what the Democrats are trying to do. Kamala's trying to do with the price controls. But those are all half measures. They don't work. The true solution to this, and Opti, could you pull up the video? Because Elon is so close here. The true solution here, and here's Hayek pointing it out, is separating money from state. That's how you fix things. That is how you put a check on the power of government, on the power of politicians. Because if not, every 4 years, right, you better hope that, you know, the politician in place doesn't want to debase the currency. You're putting a lot of trust in them. And now the good news of all this is I'm talking about fixing the system. But the thing is, you don't have to wait for the system to fix. You could actually start benefiting from this today, right now, by choosing to opt out of it entirely. And the way that you do it, look, someone put in the chat, Mikkel, in the last 4 years, the US has printed 40% of its circulating currency. And if you look at housing prices, it's literally a direct correlation between the M2 money supply and the cost of an average price in the US. And then you see the politicians coming in and saying, hey, you know, we're going to give you a tax credit. And then my response would be like, fuck you, dude, stop printing money. Like, it's very simple. Like, I'm sorry to curse, but, like, you know, it's the truth. Here's Peter. Let's hear what he has to say. I mean, here's
See, the great trouble is the money wasn't allowed to develop further. After 200 or 300 years of coins, all governments put their hands and stopped any further developments. They were not allowed to experiment on it. Money hasn't been improved. Money has rather become worse in the course of time. Government said it must not develop any further. And what we have had since in development were matters of government inventions, mostly wrong, mostly abuses of money. And I have come to the position of asking, has monetary policy ever done any good? I don't think it has. I think it has done only harm. And that's why I am now pleading for what I've called denationalization of money. I don't believe that we should ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government, because we can't take them violently out of the hands of government. All we can do is, by some sly roundabout way, introduce something they can't stop.
We found it. We found it, and that's Bitcoin. That's literally Bitcoin. That's literally what it is. So, like, yes, Elon has correctly identified the problem. Peter Schiff correctly identified the problem. All the gold bugs have correctly identified the problem. Where I think Elon fails, or fails, but comes short, and I think where Peter Schiff came short is the tool. And the tool is Bitcoin. If it stays decentralized and secure. That's the tool. And it will put a check on government. It will put like a bumpers, right? So if they ever come in there, they're like, I want to go to war. It's like, how are you going to pay for that, bro? You can't print that. You can't print the money anymore. How are you going to pay for that, right? And then all of a sudden, these politicians are going to be very, very nice to their constituents, and they're going to be like, hey guys, well, You know? And look, I'll leave it at this before I pass it on to Opti. It's not a coincidence that the first country that made Bitcoin legal tender in the Americas has the most popular president in the Americas. And it's not a coincidence that the first country that made Bitcoin legal tender, they fixed the base layer of society. They went from one of the most dangerous societies on planet Earth to one of the safest. Where the president is trying to get the country out of debt. And they have a plan that by the year 2030, they're going to do just that. And it's not a coincidence that the IMF is attacking that small country. I'm just going to leave it at that. Like, anyways, Opti, what's your take on this before we get to the culture?
Yeah, well, first off, it looks like we got some flat earthers and space is fake in the chat. So that's not my view on it. But yeah, that video of you know, the potential, I'll put in quotes, of that rocket landing is pretty crazy. And I think it does go to show that entrepreneurs are the ones that really lead society forward. You know, your thoughts on Elon Musk can be varied. My personal thoughts is like he's doing so much incredible stuff, and you know I like to be hopeful about it because it does seem like he is seemingly our real Tony Stark at the moment. Though I am a little concerned. It does seem like we're going into like an iRobot future, but that's just my takes on that Elon Musk stuff. But really getting to the point of this, and this is the main theme of our show, is the separation of money and state. And I really like that Hayek video where he pointed out what we say here all the time, is that monetary policy has done more harm than good. And I think once you really just do I wouldn't even say a deep dive, but just any research on the topic, you realize that, like, why are we allowing a small cabal of people to control the monetary policy? No one person or even small group of people can control the economy. The economy is a very complex thing. And any time that you start to pull levers, you start to manipulate and you start to distort the economy. And I think the economy, as you know, I would say a rudimentary Keynesian economist here, I think the economy is made up best when individuals make their own choices for what they think is the best for their lives and not some small cabal of governments or bankers. And I am also all for the limiting of government, at least to the roles that were set out in the beginning. I don't think the government is supposed to be big daddy government that controls every aspect of our lives. I especially don't believe that the government should be controlling the money supply, because as we've seen, as we've constantly shown on this show, the Cantillon effect of whoever is closest to the money printer is the ones that really are set up to succeed, and everyone else is getting poorer. And inflation is that hidden tax that few people understand, especially since most people are economically illiterate. This is by design. They don't want you to know that it's all about the money. It will always be about the money. And those who can manipulate the money will be in a better position than everyone else. And this is by design. And I think the thread of today's show is that there is an injustice in the system, and it's either that the system is designed this way or that it is broken. Either way, the results are the same. We are getting poorer. We are stuck in the matrix. We are stuck in the rat race. And like Haidt said, the real goal here is to denationalize money. This is the separation of money and state. I want a money that is a global neutral money, that is a global measurement of value, aka Bitcoin. And now we actually have an option here. No longer are we being forced, even though, you know, by design and laws in your own country, you are technically forced to use their money. Now we actually have an option that I think is slowly but surely proliferating around the world. And most people are waking up to this idea that, hey, I don't have to use this money that is designed to steal from me. We have a better option. It is Bitcoin. And all you have to do is just start saving in Bitcoin. Let the clown world, fiat world play out in its due course, because we all know I think it's Voltaire quote where he says all fiat money goes back to its original value, which is literally zero. So I've been kind of harping on stop using the enemy's money and start to use real money, which is Bitcoin. Start to use something that cannot be debased, that doesn't steal from you. And your life is going to improve. Again, this all boils down to one simple thing. Most people want to live a good life, and most people don't have the time to really deep dive all of these topics. They just need to use a better tool. And this is where we are. Bitcoin is a better tool. Like everyone here using the internet, like everyone using wheels. Money is a technology, and now we have a superior technology. And it's upon you, the individual, to take responsibility and protect yourself by saving in Bitcoin. This is how we win. But yeah, flat earthers in the chat getting triggered. Oh man.
Oh man. Well, I personally like Elon. I have a Tesla. It's freaking dope. Dude lands rockets. I understand Opti is like, dude, iRobot by Elon, and I also suspect that Opti's a little bit jealous because Elon's robot is called Optimus, and Optimus, and Elon obviously Opti's Optimus. So I suspect there might be a little bit of jealousy there, but it's okay. Like Opti's not going to be replaced by a robot anytime soon. But maybe when the first model, maybe actually, but that's not going to happen for a while now.
Well, you know, Nico, I will have the last laugh when you have a robot made and it goes rogue on you. So, hey, we'll see who's right at the end of the day.
Anyways, guys, let's move on to the culture segment. We have a lot to talk about. Let's check it out. Here we go. All right, everybody, I do want to give a very special shout out, of course, to our sponsor, the Orange Pill app. Guys, stack friends who stack sats. Join the 12,233 Bitcoiners that are currently on the application. To get started, all you got to do is scan the QR code, check the link in the video description. The Orange Pill app has a really cool geographical feature. So if you're on the go, you're moving, you don't know anybody in your new city, or you've been in your city for a while, you don't know any Bitcoiners around you, the Orange Pill app is for you. It will allow you to send DMs to Bitcoiners that are currently near you, and it'll allow you to connect with them. So download the Orange Pill app today, scan the QR code, or check the link in the video description. It's one of the best ways to send me a message. So if you want to reach me directly, send me a message on the Orange Pill app. I'm going to pass it on to Opti. I don't even know. Opti, what are we talking about during the culture?
Well, I really wanted to bring this thread up last week, but we had guests all week. And honestly, I think it's fitting a lot better on today's show because we are talking about the, denationalization of money and fiat money and printing money and what those problems are. And obviously it is a Bitcoin show. And this is the fundamental problem that we see in the world right now. It's all about the money. It will always be about the money. Why do we have a rogue class of quote unquote politicians running wild with the money printer and making all of us poor? Anyways, this thread here is, I've never really heard it in this way. I think we touch on this idea constantly, like what the problem of fiat money is. And I saw this thread and I found it very interesting. And this is, on Twitter, it's very small claims, but he's an OG Bitcoiner. I don't know if I'm doxing him by saying his name. I'm not going to say his name, but I think everyone knows who his name is. I don't know if I should say it. But anyways, yeah, I'm not going to say it because if you know, you know. Anyways, this is a great thread. And honestly, I'm going to read the thread, but I kind of want to hear Nico's take on this as well, and my take on it, because we always hit on this, but I think it's a new reframing of the problems with fiat money. So we have very small claims on Twitter goes, the reason that fiat is a problem is simple. One, a republic can only survive if the treasury can afford to run the government, which we constantly hit on. Two, you are not voting to send someone to Washington to vote for your principles and beliefs. You are sending them to decide how to spend the treasury, which I think we talk on this constantly, but we've never actually framed it in this way. Three, if it is true that the actual job of a congressman is to spend the treasury, then the only people who should be able to vote for them are the people that fund the treasury, aka you guys. Four, fiat allows the government to build a treasury absent of its people, which we constantly talk about. Five, the government uses fiat to inflate the currency, which is a tax, though a very fair one. You could argue against that, but this is the point. Because six, it's an egalitarian tax. The creation of fiat causes everyone to become a contributor to the treasury. I've never heard it that way, but it's very interesting. Seven, if everyone is a contributor, then everyone gets to vote. Eight, if everyone gets to vote, you are no longer a sustainable republic because those who are not actually net contributors are able to vote themselves advantages by defunding the treasury that was funded by others. Again, we constantly talk about the administrative state. We talk about the Cantillon effect. Nine, a fiat system puts government in control of funding the treasury rather than the people, but modern monetary theorists advocates using taxes and inflation simultaneously ultimately achieve the same end. While this works, it takes all bargaining power out of the hands of the people who fund the government, and that's why fiat is bad. It's not bad because it is a tax or because taxes are theft or because modern monetary theorists are evil or whatever you dumb libertarian friends told you. It's bad because it is incompatible with our form of government. The founders were right. And we've talked about this constantly. We always hit up on this problem that fiat money is the problem. Obviously, you can view this very differently. And this Bitcoiner has been around for a long time. He's a OG Bitcoiner, made content in the past. And I've never heard it this way, but it is very interesting. And we always hit on a very similar topic. I've been, classic cliche, man talks about the Roman Empire, but we've seen this happen when empires do start to collapse, that the powers that be, though, the elite, if you will, they start to steal the coffers as quickly as possible, and they try to steal and extract as much wealth from the population as possible. And usually they try to do this in sly, roundabout ways. And this is why we think Bitcoin is the solution to this, because again, it is a sly roundabout way of stopping this problem. And you don't really have to understand all the technicalities of this, but I really like this framing that when you do vote for someone, a politician, to represent your principles, or rather, represent you, the person, what you're really voting for is someone to spend the treasury. And as much as we hit on this constantly, we've never really talked about that. And this is what we always say on here on the show, that the powers that be, the politicians in Washington, they're completely detached from the population, and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff that no one would agree to. And this fundamentally collapses when you go back to a Bitcoin standard, when they can't slyly steal from you. And we always hit on these topics. And I know it gets a little spicy in there when he's trolling libertarians and stuff. But I found that as a very interesting reframing of the problems that we always talk about here on the show, but we've never put it in this way. And I just really liked it. I wanted to talk about it last week, but I think it's more fitting on today's show, considering all the topics that we talked about. Anyways, end of rant. Nico, what's your thoughts on this?
Dude, I mean, we're in sync again, coincidentally.
Yeah, right.
And also shout out to the 200 likes of you guys watching live on YouTube. If you guys are watching live on Rumble and Nostr, we appreciate you. And of course, everyone watching us live on X. So if you guys are enjoying the show, make sure to smash the like button, share the video. It really, really helps pushing the orange signal forward, getting this message out there. More and more people need to be informed on what the actual problem of their economic woes is, and not this whole, it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans, it's the liberals, it's the conservatives. No, it's broken money. It's literally broken money. So I actually wanted to read a quote from George Washington. He says, quote, "Paper money has had the effect in your state that it will ever have, to ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open the door to every species of fraud and injustice." So even the founding fathers were not fans of paper money, right? Andrew Jackson is very well known for, getting elected on the basis of shutting down the National Bank of the United States. It was only because of the creature, read The Creature from Jekyll Island, and gives into the story of that. But the secret meeting, that took place in the early 1900s, and they sold the American public on the idea that central banking was going to provide stability. That wasn't the case at all whatsoever. That was completely wrong. It was just wrong on every single front. And it has Frankenstein government. It has taken the power from the hands of the people back to the hands of the government. And that will not be fixed until we separate money from state. Because it's just incentives, dude. It's incentives, bro. Like, this is what you guys have to understand. It's like, no one is better than their incentives. Like, these politicians aren't twirling their mustaches saying, ha, 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 how do I steal from them? No, they're following their incentives. And if you're incentivized to go to DC and there's a money printer, Okay, could you imagine that? Can you imagine the power that comes from that? How many hours a day do you spend working? And then there's a bureaucratic elite that have the power to just poof, like created out of thin air. And then compare that with Bitcoin. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're the emperor, king, prince, whatever. If you want to make more Bitcoin, you got to mine it, you got to buy it, or you got to earn it. Like everybody else, there's no special privileges in that system. And I would turn their argument against them because they say that Bitcoin is a private money. Their money is non-audible. They have the ability to create out of thin air, and there's no accountability. Bitcoin is open source. It's an open ledger, and anyone could create more Bitcoin. What sounds more public and private to you, right? And again, one last thing. It's not a coincidence, Ron Paul quote, that the bloodiest century in human history was a century of central banking. Another thing. I don't think it's a coincidence that the establishment of the federal income tax was the same year as the establishment of the central bank in the United States. So I think America, and in fact, any country that has a central bank, has been held hostage, is being held hostage by this system. And we now have a way out of it. And we now have a way to protest against it. And that protest is buying Bitcoin, earning Bitcoin, mining Bitcoin, taking that Bitcoin into self-custody. If enough of the population does that, we win by default. It's game, set, match. I would say that percentage is about roughly 5 to 10% of the population. If 5 to 10 of the population, 5 to 10% of the population in your country opts out into Bitcoin, and they use Bitcoin as their unit of account, as their primary monetary unit, I'm telling you, like, it's game over. It's done. Because their power derives from the fact that people are using this said currency. If more and more people opt out and they choose not to use that said currency because it's corrupt, then it takes away their power, right? And this is why you're seeing the system fight back. This is why you're seeing the two-tier justice system. This is why we're highlighting you the fact that, crypto exchange developers and privacy wallet developers get locked in prison while the banks get, a slap on the wrist and a fine, right? Like, this is the separation of money and state. This election coming up is incredibly important, less than a month from now, right? It's going to determine the regulatory environment in the United States for the next 4 years. So, yeah, but this is what it's all about. We'll be your guide through these chaotic times. But I'm telling you, my money, literally no pun intended, is on incentives versus coercion. And I think the state, the only thing they have left is coercion. And we have incentives on our side. And I think incentives are going to rule the day, in my humble opinion. Because, look, if you look at Cuba, if you look at East Berlin and West Berlin, they had to build a wall. And even when they built a wall, people still wanted to escape for freedom. With Cuba, people are literally risked their lives to build a raft to come to Miami for freedom, right? So even in countries where they've made, Bitcoin illegal, right? People still use Bitcoin. Why? Because they want the benefits of Bitcoin. So, look at the war on drugs. That didn't really work out that much. And you can't look at me straight in the eye as a politician and tell me that writing down 12 words is somehow dangerous to society. Like, come on now, dude. Anyways, guys, this is what the peaceful revolution is all about. This was Simply Bitcoin Live for October 14, 2024. I'm your host, Nico. This is my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields. I will be live streaming for the next 2 weeks until Lugano in Switzerland from Paris, France. So it's going to be hopefully it gets some better scenes and some special things. Maybe I'll bring out a baguette to tomorrow's show. But anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Smash the like button, consider subscribing, and we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live.
You by bitcoinwell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.